Good evening. Welcome to Writers on Writing. We come to you every Sunday and give you, our listening audience, an opportunity to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work, their lives, and their craft. My name is Clarence Reynolds. I'm the director at the Center for Black Literature here at Medgar Evers College, and I'm pleased to be the guest host of Dr. Brenda Green, executive director at the Center for Black Literature and director of the National Black Writers Conference. Today I'm happy to be speaking with Miss Sophfronia Scott. Sophfronia Scott's latest novel is called Unforgivable Love. It's a retelling of the story Dangerous Liaisons. Sophfronia hails from Lorain, Ohio. She was a writer and editor at Time and People magazines before publishing her first novel, All I Need to Get By. Unforgivable Love is her second novel, and she has also completed a spiritual memoir with her son titled This Child of Faith, and also a collection of, which is a collection of essays, and Love's Long Line. Sophfronia holds a BA in English from Harvard and an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts. She lives in Sandy Hill, Connecticut with her husband and son. Welcome, Sophfronia.
Hi, Clarence. Thank you.
Great. I want to talk about this story, Unforgivable Love. It's an amazing story, and it's a retelling of a 1782 novel that was published in France. How long did it take you to write this retelling, and what was the genesis of your wanting to tell this story?
Well, the genesis came from years ago, seeing the film Dangerous Liaisons with Glenn Close, John Malkovich, and Michelle Pfeiffer. And I saw that film, and it just stayed on my mind all of these years. And that led me to read the book. I'd never heard of the book before, and I found the book fascinating. And it wasn't until a few years ago when a friend of mine suggested that there should be a version of that book with black characters. And I actually wrote it as a movie first, because I wanted to try a screenplay. And my agent was the one who suggested that it be a novel. And I was happy to do that because I really had this huge vision in my head that I felt could only be realized in a novel.
Wow. Now, the story is based on the original plot, as I mentioned, which was based in 1782 in an aristocratic Parisian society. How did you come about choosing the year 1947 in Harlem as the time for your version of the story?
Well, I knew I wanted it to be Harlem because I knew that I could translate that feeling of elegance and aristocracy to Harlem. I love the glamour of that era. I love the fashion and the people. But specifically 1947, though, because I wanted to incorporate Jackie Robinson's crossing the color line in baseball. I wanted that to be a special moment for my character, Valiant Jackson. And I thought that could be a catalyst for him, having been present at that moment.
Okay. Now, Val is a Valiant Jackson, or Val as you call him in the story, is a 35-year-old club owner, and he's also a womanizer. And his accomplice in the story is May, who is a well-off 33-year-old daughter whose mother was an entrepreneur and the maker of hair products, which is close to Madam C.J. Walker. How did you decide to attribute those details to your characters?
The details of
their background.
Okay, well, the rakishness, of course, is from the original, because
Right.
these are just bad characters to begin with. But in terms of wanting them, these characters had to have money. Mm-hmm. So I needed that to be plausible. And for me, of course, Madam C.J. Walker immediately came to mind because she was the first black female millionaire. And I had already read several years ago the biography of her written by her great-granddaughter, Alelia Bundles, mm-hmm. who I happen to know because she is also a journalist and a fellow Harvard graduate. And so I already had that book and that history in my head, and so I knew that I could attribute money and create a character out of that kind of background. And for Val, that was a lot easier because, we have rakish characters from films like Harlem Nights that get their, characters who get their money from shadier means. And so he was easier to create in that respect.
Oh, Now, there are lots of details in your story, and you include a lot of designer names and the description of expensive items and also the surroundings in the house. And they're just filled with wonderful descriptions of wealth and opulence. Can you talk a little bit about the research for creating these details of that time in your novel?
Okay. First of all, I will say that I'm not someone who does a lot of research up front because I think it's too easy to get caught up in the research and not do the writing.
Hmm.
And maybe this is from my background as a journalist that I know how to put up the scaffolding and then go find the details that I need. So so I would write scenes and then go back in revision and say, okay, she's not wearing any dress. What specifically is this dress? And she's just not putting on any perfume. What perfume is of the time? And then I would go research the specific details that I wanted. Some of that research turned out to be hugely fortunate because I would find dresses um, that that to me looked very much in terms of attitude of some of the dresses from the film Dangerous Liaison. And I knew right away that, oh, I wanted, May to wear these certain Christian Dior fashions. And so it was, I like being very specific in that way because I think it helps to put the reader in the world if they could, actually hear certain music and visualize the dresses.
A lot of listeners may not be familiar with Dangerous Liaisons. Can you tell us a little bit about the story, a little bit about the plot
Yeah,
line, please?
yeah. Basically, you have these two partners in crime, the Marquis de Merteuil and Valmont, the Vicomte Valmont. And basically, they are aristocracy, and they spend their time manipulating people, usually involving sex. And this is the way they control and for them, create their own personal value in the world. They value their reputation, and they value the power that they wield over people. And the conflict in the story comes when the Marquis discovers that a former lover of hers has been engaged to her cousin, and she knows that this man only wants the girl because she's a virgin. And so she's incensed by this, and she insists that Valmont deflower this girl. But he won't do it because he's already got his own project. He's trying to seduce a wife well known for her virtue. And so the Marquis strikes a deal with him. She says, okay, you succeed with that woman, and you can have a night with me. And so that sets the whole ball of wax into motion.
And it does.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the scenes with the characters when they had their moments of self-discovery, and their self-discovery of what love is and what freedom is and what fulfillment means to them and what passion and what their true beliefs are. Can you talk about the themes and emotions you wanted to address or explore? And each one of these characters have a different meaning in their discovery about themselves. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
yeah. You hit on so many of the right words: fulfillment, uh, passion, spirit. You know, all of these things to me are the elements of our humanity, and we can fall into a lot of trouble when we don't connect with ourselves on a deeper level. So to me, that's the natural conflict in the book. But but I wanted to take the reader on the journey of what it is to number one, recognize when something is missing within oneself, and then number two, go on that journey of trying to discover it.
No, when you talked about trying to discover it, I enjoy reading old interviews with authors, and I recently read an old interview with James Baldwin,
Mm,
and in the interview he says, when you're writing, you're trying to find out something which you don't know. The whole
yeah,
language of writing for me is finding out what you don't want to know, what you don't want to find out, but something forces you to go anyway. Can you
yes.
talk? Can you talk about that for you in terms of your writing as well?
Yeah, to me, my constant unfolding is about risk and how you have to take risks to go on this journey of discovery. And the thing that was revealing to me that's not a good thing, but that I feel that one must walk through is that journey isn't always easy, and it isn't always pretty, and it can be incredibly hard. Um, but does that mean you shouldn't go? Does it mean it's not worth it?
Mhm.
No. And so I found myself wanting to put that in the book. You know, that even though some might think that this is a sad ending, I want people to question that. You
Mhm.
know, I even rewrote some of the ending because I wanted to have a sense of hope in there. But to know that, you know, the risk for love is always worth it.
And that's what this is overall. It's a love story.
Yes.
In the book, you choose the song "Nature Boy" that was recorded by Nat King Cole, and also this book "The Street" by one of my favorite authors, Ann Petrie. These
Mhm.
figure prominently in the storyline.
Yes.
How did you go about selecting these works connected to African American music and literature for your story?
Well, you know, Clarence, I I connect with things that move me, right? So I want to, when I write about specific things like that, um, I like to not just be, you know, putting in a detail. If it's something that moved me, I'm going to connect with it somehow in the story. And honestly, my first experience with Nature Boy was not the Nat King Cole version. I heard it sung in Moulin Rouge,
Mm-hmm.
the Baz Luhrmann film,
Mm-hmm.
and that line of how you know, to love and be loved, you know, is the most important thing. When I heard that line, that just stuck with me like a bell in my head, and it was just so moving. And when I found out that that song was written during the time of my book, and when I found the Nat King Cole version, I it was no question, this song has to be in the book, and I could see how it could be an emotional trigger. I was so excited for that. It just, you know, I knew it was going to be throughout the book. Um, I didn't expect that with The Street. I started reading The Street only for research purposes because it was a contemporary book. It came out in 1946. So I liked that it was not only written at the time, but it was written of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Ann Petrie wrote it as a contemporary book. And so I was reading it, and I was so struck by the desolation in the story, and I was moved by Ludi's problems and having to leave her son, 8 years old, at home alone at night while she looked for work. That was just so devastating to me. And then it occurred to me that if I'm devastated by it, then certainly someone reading the book at the time would have been devastated by it. So why not ascribe what I'm feeling to one of my characters, to have her reading the book? And it seemed most natural for Elizabeth, my character Elizabeth, to have those emotions and to be reading this book. And so that's how it ended up in the manuscript.
Right. About your writing process, what comes first for you, the plot or the idea of wanting to tell a compelling story, or the development of complex characters? You have lots of complex characters in this story.
Mm. You know, of course, I in a certain way knew the story because, of course, I have dangerous liaisons. But you can't just, you know, create these people and say, oh, here they are, they're black,
Mm-hmm.
and just move them through the same story. That wouldn't work. I would have to build this story originally from the ground up. And to me, any story begins with characters. So I definitely started with the characters and understanding who they are and what drives them and what do they want. Because to me, that's a compelling story, is that we have to understand these characters and we want to follow them on the journey. So I began with them.
Mm-hmm. I once heard a writer say that good people do not make for interesting characters. Um, did any of your characters, are they modeled after a real person or composites of people, or are they simply from your imagination?
They're from my imagination,
Wow.
but I have to say that there are images in my head because I am a visual person, and movies have a big influence on me, obviously. So, for example, when I was writing the character of May, I constantly had um, Lynn Whitfield in my head. And
Okay.
did you ever see A Thin Line Between Love and Hate?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
So,
So
that was
that,
with Martin
Martin Lawrence.
Martin Lawrence. Yes.
Exactly. You know, so I was thinking about her that power, and she was scary. So I was thinking of that, but I also saw her in Eve's Bayou,
Yes,
and
I love that movie as well.
so do I. And in that movie, she is dressed so elegantly, and the way she moves through the room, I thought that's what I want May Malveaux to be. So, and to have that brilliant smile and just that presence, like this glowing presence. So she was very much in my mind. Um, for Val Jackson, I was constantly thinking of Denzel Washington because same thing, this effervescent personality, this smile that just would attract people like a magnet. But at the same time, he has played dangerous characters, um, but all of his characters also have a vulnerability about them.
Mm.
So I very much wanted Val to have that vulnerability. So I was thinking about the various versions of Denzel Washington that I'd seen in films over the years, and so many of them came to play as I built that character.
Writers often give voice to perspective close to their own beliefs and sometimes far from them. What kind of perspectives, either emotional or moral, or is there something else, that you aim to include in your works, and why?
Mm, I feel that I was definitely um, making some statement about sexuality in this book because I feel as though it's something that we are so afraid of and that we still don't know enough about because we don't talk about it enough. And to me, that's why characters like May and Val can manipulate people so easily, is because they take advantage of that. They take advantage of what we don't know and what we don't fear when it comes to our sexuality. So I definitely wanted to put that out there, that not only do we need to know more about it, but that it's natural for us to know more about ourselves because our sexuality is, the way we express, one of the ways we express our humanity. So I really wanted to put that on the table.
Right. One of the things I also found interesting was that there's a passage in the book um, that sort of describes the fact that men and women can share desires, talking about sexual desires, but not the power to attend to those desires.
Yeah.
And there's also a point where Elizabeth's father is held to beliefs about a woman's place in society when she wanted to go out for a job, and her father said, "No, we'll find something else for you." How much do you think the roles or beliefs of men and women have changed in society since 1947, especially with regard to women and men displaying their emotions sexually and non-sexually?
Mm. I think in terms of the sexuality, there's so much more out there, which can be almost a distraction, I think, because I think it seems like we are so much more open about sexuality because of the images that are out there and because of what's available in the media. But I think it's almost like a smokescreen because I think when we get right down to it, I think there's still that it's still not enough discussed.
Yeah.
Right? We still don't truly understand it on an individual level for ourselves personally. In terms of the roles of women, it's same kind of weird dichotomy in that yes, so much more is open and available, but it's been my experience that women seem that there are women who seem not as comfortable in taking hold of those roles, and I notice that, and I find that very curious that men have so much more attitude about, especially when it comes to creation, that they will just walk in and say that they've done something when it's only half done really, and a woman will do the full scale thing and be apologetic because they think it's not enough.
Right.
When I first did that first screenplay, and I showed it to a friend who is a well-known screenwriter, she was surprised by how complete the screenplay was. She said, "Do you realize that there are men who will storm into a meeting with not even half this and demand $150,000 for it?"
Wow.
And I was like, that's amazing, but that is the world we live in.
Are there any plans to move forward with the screenplay, or was the novel going to be it for this story?
Well, for me, the novel is my full expression of it.
Okay.
But it looks like at some point there will be some sort of film or TV representation of it. But that's in the works
And it's a
And
racy story. It would be great to make a great movie.
I think so too. But I do have a film agent who is fielding those inquiries, and so fingers crossed that something will come of that.
Now, Unforgivable Love is your second novel. Your
Yeah.
first novel is called All I Need to Get By, and since then you've written a spiritual memoir with your son called This Child of Faith and a collection of essays, Love's Long Line. What kind of stories do you want to tell through your writing?
In one way or another, I'm always writing about love, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I'm looking at the love that we have for each other, for our children, the love between ourselves and our God. I'm looking at our connection in the world. When I write about essays, especially if it's memoir or personal essay, I'm in one way or another looking at my acceptance of love, or my search for love, or my connection with love. Even if the word is not in there, at the end of the day, I'm still writing about love. Why? I don't know.
I'm sure there's a reason why.
Pardon me?
I'm sure there's a reason why. It's something that you want to express and that you think that's very much needed to be shared.
Yeah, I wrote I actually delivered a homily at a church in Chattanooga recently, and I just posted the text from that homily where I said, I came here prepared to talk about something else. Because it seems like I'm always talking about love, and so I was going to talk about something else. But all of the lectionary readings for that day from Scripture were about love. Mm-hmm. They were about, God saying, that the big commandments are loving God and loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And I said, okay, I have to give up here because obviously God is saying, Sophfronia, go do that thing that you do. And I think maybe that's my job, is to let people know, look, you are loved. Right. You are loved. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Dive in there.
Great. Now, I hope I'm not repeating myself here, but you've expressed, the types of stories you want to tell. Can you share what personal satisfaction you get from writing? I mean, what does Sophfronia get from sitting down and saying that this is going to come out of me, this story, this collection of essays, or this memoir?
It's so strange when I'm in it. I'm just very much in the work, but when it's done, there is this amazing sense of like something having gone through me, like a kind of energy or something, and a sense of satisfaction and completion. And I can only think that it's because I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. I have no control over what happens after that. The rest is just icing on the cake. If someone really connects with it, with the work, it's like, wow, okay, that's really cool. But I can't go into the work expecting or hoping for that. Likewise, I know my work is not for everyone, so I can't get too high when someone likes it. I can't get too low when someone doesn't like it. I can only be in my space and do the work that I feel I'm supposed to be doing.
Great. Well, I want to thank you so much, Sophfronia, for visiting with us and for talking about your latest book, Unforgivable Love. It's now out by William Morrow. Thank you so much, Sophfronia. I appreciate your talking to us on Writers and Writing.
Oh, thank you, Clarence. I'm happy to get to be here.
I'd also like to thank Mr. Fitz Richardson, our sound engineer here at Medgar Evers College, station WNYE. And I'd like to thank Dr. Brenda Green for having me in as our guest host. And remember, the writer is always reading, the reader is always writing. Empower yourselves as readers and writers. Thank you so much for listening.
Next song was inspired by a poem written by Langston Hughes. I'm sure most of you have heard of Langston Hughes. And he wrote a poem about rivers.